I will do roll call. Directors Osborne and Zini and Day present. Director Veracamp participating via teleconference. Director Dwyer absent. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Clerk of the Board Sullivan present. We convene this morning's meeting at 9:03.
Okay. We need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please, no? Oh, we have to,
Public comment. and
Public
board
comment. On the agenda, on the motion. Any public on
There
that?
any members of the board wishing to speak on the adoption of the agenda? And it does not appear that we have any members of the public wishing to speak. If there's any members of the public wishing to speak that are participating remotely, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda for any public comment period. It does not appear at this time that there are any members of the public wishing to speak. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote? Division 1,
Aye.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 5, Division 1, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries.
Okay, next on our agenda is General Manager's Employee Recognition.
Good morning. We have one recognition. We had Mr. and Mrs. Lavelle of El Dorado County, and a customer for over 35 years, sent us a thank you note stating, naturally, we will continue to conserve our precious water, but we wanted all who work for EID to know we're grateful, as our grown children, grandchildren are, for your foresight. I think that's regarding our plentiful water supply situation, so thank you. Later on, I do have an impromptu staff report regarding the Caldor fire and the impacts here. And that concludes the recognition portion.
Our next item is public comment, and if there's anyone from the public who wants to make a comment regarding anything that's not on the agenda, this is your opportunity. And the clerk will look on the chat line or
We have one member of the public wishing to speak. You have the floor.
Good morning. I assume can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dane Wadley. I'm the CSDA field coordinator for El Dorado County. I just wanted to come on real briefly and just give you guys a quick update. Hopefully you've seen maybe some of our emails, but CSDA, obviously you guys are a member of CSDA. We do some advocacy work on your behalf in Sacramento and DC, and we were able to secure some COVID relief funding specifically for special districts in the state budget that was recently approved. And long story short, there's a plan that's currently being developed with CSDA and the California Department of Finance, Governor's Department of Finance, on basically rolling out this application that districts like you guys or others would be able to apply for. So I'll certainly be in contact more with you all, and certainly staff too, about those details as they come out. The plan should come out in the next couple of weeks, and the application period after that, and ultimately getting the dollars out to the districts who have had COVID relief or COVID impacts, of course. More to come on that. I just wanted to touch bases with you, just make sure you're all aware of it, and that there's going to be kind of some more information and a plan coming to take advantage of that in the coming weeks and months. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave, and we'll be in touch. I'm sure we're working hard on identifying a number of different projects.
yes, and next Monday I will be in attendance at the CSDA conference and take vigilant notes.
Great. Look forward to seeing you.
All right. Okay, communications, General Manager. That was,
Yes.
yeah.
As you well are aware, we've had the Caldor fire up here. We were very concerned with how that's going to impact our customers and our physical assets. Dan Corcoran, our operations manager, or our director, has been coordinating a lot of the incident command or the operational command here. Started Tuesday, and we declared an emergency, which I hope the board will ratify on this agenda because we didn't know what type of damages we're going to incur. We were proactive, and I declared the emergency, again, asking the board to ratify it. Dan will brief you on what the fire was about and how that may or may not impact our assets. Thank you.
Vice President Anzini, members of the board, good morning. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Paulson. This morning, we just have a brief update for you on what is a very active and dynamic situation for the entire county and the district as well. As General Manager had indicated we're currently actively coordinating with state and federal resources for the Caldor fire. That situation started Saturday night at a long distance from the district's assets. It was about 7 p.m. on Saturday night. For about 48 hours, the fire was working itself down in a drainage down in the Middle Fork Cosumnes River. So for those familiar with the county, that is quite a distance from the district's active main service area. On Monday night, I think everybody's well aware of the very sad, tragic events through Grizzly Flat into Tuesday morning. As that occurred at daylight Tuesday morning, General Manager Abercrombie coordinated with staff, and we decided to have a limited activation of our emergency operations center here at the district. The first time in quite some time, fortunately, we've had to do that, but because of preparedness, we were ready to do so. This morning will be, obviously, because of the dynamic situation, I will just give a general update, and I'll just first start by saying, fortunately, there are no known damage to any district assets at this time. However, every day is a different day, and staff have been working 24 hours a day now for a week. So it's a very dynamic situation, and the most important thing for us, as well as all the state and federal resources out there, is 100% safety. And I'm happy to say we've had 0 safety-related incidents over the course of the week, despite a tremendous amount of hours. I'm sure Human Resources will, when they get their timesheets this time period, is going to be pretty significant. We'll have an update for you how many hours have gone into it. I honestly don't know, but it is hundreds and hundreds of hours out there. So just real quickly, this morning we sit at about 106,000 acres, 5% containment, and that 5% containment came last night. So it's going to be a long effort. So that's why we're very focused on maintaining safety. Fortunately, the next 3 days, the weather looks favorable, and with the efforts that we are doing in coordination with limited access to inspect our resources with law enforcement liaisons at the Incident Command Center at the county fairgrounds, we plan to be able to continue to access and inspect our resources over the next 3 days. But fortunately, conditions appear to be more favorable over the foreseeable future and not what occurred on Saturday. Saturday, as everybody well knows, there was explosive fire growth directly related to Project 184 assets. Thankful to the valiant efforts of the firefighters, we sustained no known damage to any district asset on that day. That's not how I called General Manager Abercrombie that morning. We did expect to lose district assets that day, but fortunately we did not. So we will hopefully at the next board meeting have a more full, complete update. Hopefully be able to turn the corner over the next week. But I just want to reiterate, it's going to be many weeks. We're going to be sustaining this operation. General Manager, as Incident Commander, has set up a staffing plan, and we'll be maintaining that over the next probably 2-ish weeks at least. And I think that's the full quick update, and we do have a progression map for you. living on a lot of coffee, so a little water in here. So. Okay, so this is one of the many resources provided by the countywide Incident Command Center. This is what's known as a fire progression map. The most recent fire growth is the darkest red, and the oldest is the darkest green. So it just gives you a sense of, and each of those are approximately, it's not always the case, but approximately one burn period, one afternoon burn period. So you kind of see it's almost like a daily progression. It's not quite that because it's based upon infrared mapping. But that dark red that you see, this is yesterday's map, was Saturday afternoon. So you could see those three fingers that moved towards and over that spot fire is 2 miles ahead of the main fire, the one on the north side of 50 that we're contained now. So obviously that type of growth, no matter what they're doing to protect our assets, the firefighter safety obviously is primacy in that case. But they've been in there for 5 days now, removing vegetation, applying retardant, a very intensive effort. They definitely understand the importance of maintaining that water supply for the community, as well as for firefighting resources. Some actions that staff have taken during this.
Well, Dan, if I
yes.
could interrupt just for a second, in case the board doesn't know exactly where the canal is.
Oh, I apologize.
Res A and Sly Park, if you could just highlight that, and then you can explain those fingers and all
Thank
that
you.
stuff.
We look at a lot of maps, and I forgot this is a different map than. So we'll first start talking about the Reservoir A water treatment plant, and that's what the clerk is showing you now. As most folks may be aware, and for those folks listening online, it's on Slide Park Road, down below, about a mile below the reservoir. That treatment plant is the only treatment plant that can serve every district customer and can never go offline, never. That facility is currently, for the past 6 days now, is being staffed 24 hours a day by 2 staff, rotating rest periods. The Incident Command Center has that as a primary value at risk and is ready to protect that if necessary. I can say, fortunately, the fire has not had extensive uncontrolled growth in that location. For those that do view the mapping, there was active fire down below the dam last night, and that is because of controlled burning operations in order to protect it. So I just want to reiterate that. I'm sorry? Yes, yes. So I just want to make sure to reiterate that to the public when they see that map, to understand some of the fire is purposeful, and that's to protect that community, protect the Reservoir A treatment plant, and protect the public in that area. So fortunately, we're going to continue, hopefully, to maintain in that direction over the next several days, continue to protect all the way down Sly Park Road. And next, we'll move up to the El Dorado Canal. So, clerk, if you can move to the up to Kybers, where it says on the Highway 50 corridor. Just a little west of that point is where the El Dorado Diversion Dam, or Kybers Diversion Dam for Project 184, is located. And as the board knows, and just for orientation to the public, there are the 22-mile canal between that location and the town of Pollock Pines that contains approximately 35 flume structures, 17 of which are constructed of wood. And so we've been working, actually, we've been moving with the fire and with close coordination of law enforcement liaison east as the fire has moved east to protect those resources in very close coordination with our law enforcement liaisons, which coordinate access into and out of the evacuation zone on a very strict communication process. We've implemented a number of measures ourselves, and as I indicated earlier, the fire crews have been removing a lot of vegetation from our assets. We just heard the last board meeting, some of the prior work, fortunately, that we were able to complete, and aerial resources will continue to be applied both by helicopter and fixed-wing aircraft over the canal proximity. I do want to just confirm that we are in close coordination with Division of Drinking Water to ensure the public drinking water quality will always remain sound. We've implemented some additional voluntary water quality monitoring, just to reiterate that the case, but their Division of Drinking Water is in full support of protecting this resource. And General Manager, did I miss any additional information you'd like to cover?
Just to recognize Dan and the operations staff. This has been a very labor-intensive effort in coordinating with the fire group over at the fairgrounds. We attend, I think, 3 meetings a day over there to get the latest updates. There's a cooperators meeting Dan or his staff attends to make sure we're fully coordinated with the fire response operations. And I thought it's been just extremely successful in having that operation coordinated that way. That pretty much concludes the impromptu briefing of the board. But again, congratulations, Dan, on the efforts so far. And I know the staff has been very, very tired lately, so we'll be implementing kind of rotation and some shifts on that. But good job.
Thank you, Jim, and we definitely, Jim Landers, pass along your appreciation as well, and I know staff very much appreciate your recognition for their efforts in maintaining. We also remember that a large number of our staff are actually evacuated from their homes at this time, so we're having a significantly different work situation, and they're also going home to friends' house, to hotels, to trailers, so just to keep them in mind, please.
Thank you. I just want to make one comment before we go to the clerk of the board, that I understand many, many of you are exhausted, and with great appreciation, many of you have even lost your homes. And that is something that we can't take lightly, that you are working full-time, 24 hours a day, and I talked to a person who is an ER physician at UC Davis. He too is exhausted. And I think that what we need to look at as you as individuals, to take a moment of your own mental health and the mental health of your families, take a deep breath. We'll all get together on this and it'll be put out eventually, but it is really, really important that you have self-care too, especially in view of a 24-hour emergency. And much appreciation to all of you who have performed beyond your duties necessary. Thank you. Okay, clerk of the board.
Nothing today, thank you.
Board of directors, do you have a report?
Oh, other than I've wandered down the ICP a couple of times and the Chief Blankenheim is one of my successors, and he recognizes the importance of our assets and infrastructure, and they have committed to doing everything they can to protect it. And so they have a considerable amount of resources that are right there waiting to, if in case something goes wrong. And so anyway, we're good.
Director Vinkham.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. And again, thank you too for your comments about our personnel and that they need to have some time. And also they've been severely affected by this. I've been out in the Grizzly area and it's pretty mind-boggling. Unfortunately, as George knows, there's total devastation out there. You've seen it in other areas, and it is, and it's going to take some time to recover, but also been embedded in the ICP. And I just want to say and pass on my appreciation for Dan and all of the staff that's been in the cooperators meetings. I've been there. They've stood right up for EID. They've provided all of the GIS data and other things to protect our assets and resources, and obviously brought to the attention at a very high level our priorities and what needs to be done. So Dan and all of the staff that have been there, Jesse and others, I can't call them all out by name. I'll forget somebody, but it's been very good, and they've interacted very, very well and making me as a board member and all of us at EID very proud. So thank you for all of that. And he's absolutely correct. They'll be doing some burning now in that Fly Park area over the next few days to contain that western flank of the fire. So we just hope and pray everything goes really well for them. So thanks for the opportunity to comment on that. And again, thanks for the hard work, everybody. And day by day, we'll we will prevail.
Thank you, Director Veerkamp. Okay,
Just one
Yes.
last thing. I did reach out to Jody at Grizzly Flats, offer any assistance that EID could provide. She was just in there recently and said that the raw water supply line is functional, the tanks and the treatment plant's functional. I think they have a lot of service and reconstruction to do, but I did reach out as a mutual aid agency to provide assistance as she requests it.
okay, thank you very much. Good. So we'll move on to approve the consent calendar. Does any board member want any item pulled for discussion?
Move one.
Second,
Okay,
Yeah, I would like to make a comment that hopefully we never encounter this again, where we have 4 emergencies declared all at one time. So hopefully we can get things under control. We were down south and got an unofficial tour of the Creek Fire area, which was kind of stressful because knowing what was going on up here at the Caldor Fire, and it's a year later there, and there's still so many impacts that they're dealing with, and we're going to unfortunately be dealing with for quite some time up here, but we can get through it.
okay. There's been a motion to approve the consent calendar, and a second.
Any members of the public wishing to comment on the approval of today's consent calendar, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda for detailed instructions. Does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to comment on the consent calendar, but it appears we have additional board comment.
Oh, no, I wanted to ask the president if I could go back for a second. Go ahead and vote.
Vice President Anzini, would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote Division 1,
Aye.
Division 3,
aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 5,
Aye.
Division 1, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
I forgot my notes here, but I wanted to make a special note to the Recreation Department when they had to evacuate the campgrounds. I know that is a traumatic thing to get people out of there, and I think the hat's off to the rec people too, because they're cut outside of the norm of the operation, but to get everybody out of those campgrounds in an orderly fashion I've been through these mass evacuations, and it's not fun, and especially when you got one road in and one road out. So anyway, thanks, guys.
We'll move on to the information item, number 9.
I apologize for a second there. As you could tell, I'm not 100% this morning, so. Okay. I typically update this on the evening before the board meeting, as I'm sure you will understand that this information will be slightly dated, so I haven't had a chance to look at this since it's been published, so. No problem. So this morning, we'll have our general monthly water supply update, as well as response to the board request about water supply restrictions considerations, and that portion of the presentation will be given by general counsel. So I'm happy to say that the July demand pattern did return to more normal as we predicted. So we were about 6% over 2020. So I think our conservation efforts plus the typical. Now we're in the typical demand season, so we continue to remain adequate for our water supply through the remainder of the year. Obviously, this presentation was published prior to the concern about the canal. However, we'll have a more detailed update at our next board meeting. we've implemented multiple measures to ensure that we'll have our full water supply available to us by the end of the year. The long-term weather forecasting from the National Weather Service Climatic Center is, fortunately continuing to trend towards a dry early fall, or excuse me, a fall and early winter. A 70% chance, so a little better than 50-50, not a significant concern. But because of that, we are planning to continue to need to maintain drought-style operations from our water supply for, at least through the early part of the winter. Water hauling to Outingdale has continued, and even since the fire has continued, that area is in a voluntary evacuation, and that has been successful. And our public outreach efforts, obviously, we've pivoted a little bit in the past couple of days, but our outreach efforts, I think, have been largely successful. A lot of positive feedback. You heard one of those from our customers this morning, from General Manager. And then we'll finish our presentation about the practical and legal considerations about water use restrictions. And that has to do as it relates to additional new customers, not restrictions on current customers. Next slide, please. Okay. So these were the numbers as of about a week or so ago. I think everything is, I'd say we're on track everywhere from our last update. No main significant differences. Obviously, when you see that number at Folsom, it is concerning, but it is according to the projections. And so our end of September target still remains there, and our end of season implementation measures to ensure that we have the temporary pumping in place. That was another question the board has. That, as you saw in your agenda item, Brian and his staff at engineering have secured that on a month-to-month indefinitely. So if needed, we will have that in place. We're hoping not to need that. The lake will start to come up.
Dan, I had a question, kind of follow-up to, by the way, thank you for the feedback that you gave me and shared with the board on my questions, because there are questions I'm getting a lot from constituents down in the El Dorado Hills area. In particular for Folsom Lake, if it gets down to 200,000 acre feet this fall, which is what they're projecting, I believe, you had mentioned that there becomes some trouble if it gets down to like 125,000 acre feet, which probably wouldn't happen this year, but the concern is for next year and the year after. What would we still be able to pump with barges below that?
Sure. And actually, just to make sure, because of the nature of what was going on the past week, actually Brian Mueller prepared that summary for you. So as he comes up, I'll just give you a quick update as it relates to that. Our current existing facilities can actually remain operable until about 124,000, which is a lower level than the rest of purveyors in the reservoir. So if we were going to get down in that level, that would be extremely concerning situation. We're not projected to be there, but just to get perspective, we're actually situationally in a better position because of the configuration of our intakes versus the rest of the greater Sacramento community that does get their water from the main outlet on the dam. I believe that's around 135, Brian? I should just let you talk to it. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, about 345-foot elevation, 124,000 acre feet. And I think it's more of you need a certain amount of water over the pumps just to be able to pump water. So it's not like it goes from 20 MGD down to 0 all of a sudden. I think there'd be some gradual reduction if we get that low, but I don't think we're going to get that low anytime soon, especially not this year.
Yeah, do you know, I believe you went on the tour, we went on the tour of the new spillway, Folsom Dam, a few years back. Do you know if they've finished the reoperation manual? Because I know my friend who's into Corps of Engineers says that can take a long time. Do you know where they're at as far as reoperation?
No, I
Probably knows more, but I think it's finished. Right, go ahead.
As you can tell, this is a very large coordinated effort between both departments. So just for the orientation for members of the public, what it's called a water control manual update. The Army Corps of Engineers sets the operational rules for the reservoir although the Bureau of Reclamation operates the facility. So just to give situational awareness. And the short answer is yes, that water control manual, the Bureau of Reclamation is operating to the new update, which is favorable, which allows them to have additional storage under these similar conditions.
Right.
In carryover storage type conditions. So, and I do want to, just to help, because we do talk about some low levels, but fortunately, because of the flexibility of the district system, we also remember that there are times in winter where we actually take this facility offline completely in the winter. And and until about April, we can meet the entire El Dorado Hills demand through Jacobson Lake. And in some years we do. For instance, last year, as Brian's staff were doing the main upgrade to the facility from about November to April, I believe this whole winter, we were operating from Jacobson Lake. So it's really us looking towards continued dry conditions next spring as demands would increase. So we're a long ways in the future of hopefully a lot more storms between now and then.
Right. Yeah, the city of Folsom is going to some mandatory restrictions at the end of the month, and people are see and hear that. They see the lake, and then they see the south of 50, which is not in our jurisdiction, but they see the south of 50 hills being ripped up, and it's so a lot of conversations go on and go around.
Oh, yeah, you better believe it.
Yeah.
I'm getting it myself. Why are you asking us to save water when they're building all those houses down there?
Right.
I do have a question, if you're done, Alan. Notice in Silver Lake, have we reached out to Amador County to say that we may have to get a deviation from our agreement for the September 15th drawdown that we normally carry with them?
I actually don't see the need to do that, Director Osborne. It's multifaceted. We're a little lower by about 500 acre feet than we typically are, but we don't foresee the need to have any variations from any of our current operational commitments and/or license requirements for this year. We are actually planning on having a shorter outage and then come back online in the fall and to resume diversions from Silver Lake during the last part of the year. Some years when we have larger flume replacement projects, we'll be offline until January, at least as of now. And obviously, in light of this week's events, we'll continue to watch, but we're planning to come online about the middle of November this year. So a shorter outage, a short maintenance period, get back online and start moving that water as quickly as possible, prepare us for extended drought conditions.
Okay, thanks.
Next slide. Sorry. You can tell everybody's propping me up here. So. Okay, next slide. Okay, I continue to try to improve this slide for you. So as you see, the wetter years we've kind of just really put in the background. We're really focusing on these comparative years here. So just for orientation, members of the public, this is the storage history of Sly Park Reservoir since it's constructed. This reservoir is the only of the district's reservoirs that is a 2-year supply reservoir designed specifically for the purpose that we're in right now. So we're in the second year of drought type conditions. As you can see, red is our actual operations this year. And the dotted line through the rest of the year is under a conservative scenario of no precipitation through the end of the year, where we would likely be by the end of the year. It's around 15,800 or so. That's extremely conservative in the way, you can see, even in those real drought years, we do start to gain storage by the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas. It's very, very, very rare, if almost unprecedented, to continue to decline at that rate, but that's what we plan for, is the driest of the dry. And then just for members of the public, the dashed line is where the district would have been absent the operation of Hazel Creek Tunnel this year. And we will obviously be prepared. General Manager has given us guidance to continue planned operations of that facility going into 2022.
And before we leave this slide, we are pursuing the point of rediversion to bring water up and divert out of Kybers. If we're able to do that in a drought situation, that solid red and then dotted line would be up even higher. That's kind of our drought backstop. So that's why it's so important for us to have that point of rediversion approved.
Next slide, please. Okay, and this is just a graphical representation of the summary I gave you at the beginning. As you can see, we've crossed now below our comparative year of 2013, which is a good sign. So, see, we're starting to really turn that curve nicely, and hopefully we'll continue to decrease that or increase the negative slope or get back even below that line. Nevertheless, as I said, we plan for the highest demand, the worst case scenario for our carryover analyses. So this is just our typical annual demand curve for the last 5 years, as well as 2013, which was our last real big spring peak demand year. Next slide, please. And then our Brian's staff put together weekly updates for us just to see now these, so slightly different numbers, slightly comparison, but this is just our water usage since the board's action on June 28th. So we're about 2.3% overall higher as of August 11th. Haven't had a chance, obviously, the past week or so to update this. So exactly. So it'll be really interesting to see next time we get a chance to come to you at middle of September to see how we continue to make progress on that. Next slide, please.
Dan, if I can, on
Oh,
that,
yes.
that slide, I just, I think I've mentioned it before, I probably will mention it again, that I'm glad we have the 2013 comparisons in there. I actually would like to see that in that slide, because I think our district-wide and our customer conservation efforts since 2013 have been very significant. And I think we need to recognize that. I'm concerned, I think we know that here, but I'm concerned that, if the state tries to, next year, for instance, mandate stuff and say, oh, you got to do another 28%. Well, we've already done 28%, and now we've got to do 28% on top of that. It becomes a point of diminishing return. I'd like to see us include that in recognition of what our customers have done and what the district has done, and maybe even some slides on per capita basis, because some of this is growth fueled, which would probably show our per capita conservation would be even better. So anyhow, just my thoughts on that and concerns about painting an accurate picture of what folks are doing and have done to conserve.
That's great. I know Joe Manager described us previously. We use the term hardened conservation. So our customers have done a great job on an ongoing basis. So next slide, please, is just a similar comparison, but is from our recycled water customers. So a subset of our total. We're actually a little bit lower than we were. So you have indoor, outdoor usage. Obviously, recycled water only outdoor usage. So it'd be interesting to look at these patterns going forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are our latest numbers for end of September, and a very, as I said, very conservative end of December. I don't anticipate to be there. That's just where we are planning as the lowest. We'll probably end up hopefully coming in 18-ish thousand, just looking at comparative years for end of calendar year, and hopefully be even higher than that. But next slide, please. Our wastewater recycled water operations manager, Tracy, gave you a nice detailed presentation last time about how we operate our recycled water system and how our potable water system supplements its operations. All of their scheduled operations remain on track and continue, notwithstanding this week's events. Our operations continue. That reservoir at El Dorado Hills is on target. Things are going well. As we get this week's numbers, it will be interesting with the smoke and the inversion. Cooler weather, we likely probably had a pretty good dip in demand this week. I just haven't got a chance to look at it. So next slide, please. And I think we've really talked to this point, so we don't need to talk to any more to Folsom. So just we were able to maintain and we gave this update the last meeting. Fortunately, we were able to maintain diversions through the end of July, so we were really able, over a month. So the notice of unavailability of that water supply actually, I believe, was June 15th. General Counsel, and correct me if I was wrong, but I believe it's June 15th. So over a month, we were able to sustain operations there through that alternative release from Side Park Creek that General Counsel was able to secure. So that was a significant win for the district and for the resources. So we're currently in stage 4. and we're providing public health and safety level supplies from the district's main system. Every day, we're trucking water on the Pleasant Valley area down to Outingdale. Obviously, that's being coordinated with emergency operations because the evacuations on the east side of that road. Outingdale community itself is voluntary. East of that is mandatory, obviously, because of the active fire situation. We've been both through email and mailing, phone calls, just really reaching out to our customers to make sure they're aware of that situation. And our daily hauling is really right on target, about 26,000, which is that public health and safety allocation. Again, this past week may be a little bit different because of people being voluntarily evacuating out of the area, but we're right on target. We're where we should be in terms of the amount of water we should be delivering for public health and safety purposes. And we continue, and you just heard at the beginning of this meeting, to look for potential grant funding types for some of these operational expenses.
How are we doing on our dam repair there? Is it, I probably got curtailed, I would expect.
Unfortunately, we were scheduled to mobilize today.
Okay,
So I would estimate we're about a week behind where we want to be. I don't think we're impacting our ability to achieve that operational objective this year. We have the ability to pivot, and I'm hoping with what we anticipate turning the corner this week, we're going to start to shift some of our resources, get them their rest periods that Jim had talked about, get them back, and start to turn back to that project. We were getting all of our supplies and everything lined up, and then obviously we had to divert, no pun intended, to this.
one of the potentials is that now that the green vegetation is not green anymore, it will not be transporting water out of the river, and its potential, we could start getting flows back in the river again sooner than we might have anticipated.
Yeah, so Director Osborne, you bring a very good point. In our planning branch, which Brian is leading, our EOC, that is one of our longer-term operational objectives for both the Middle Fork Cosumnes, for the Outingdale community, Sly Park, for Camp Creek, as well as Park Creek and Hazel Creek, and the Kybers Diversion Dam are looking at debris flows this winter and making sure our facilities can safely accommodate them without having damage. So fortunately, as we looked at the heat mapping, and I was actually, when I was over there this morning, we'll be getting updated intel from Forest Service as they do additional analyses. I'm feeling better than I was on Saturday in terms of the amount of heat that went over some of our areas, but that is a real concern. And once we get out of this, there'll be planning will immediately pivot to that to help ensure that we need to implement additional measures to maintain the safety of our facilities this winter.
Okay, thanks.
And one thing we didn't cover in the update is Camp 5 and Sly Park Rec are evacuated. So we don't have any assets up there to do much anything else except for protect our assets today.
Okay, and we touched on this at the beginning of our discussion today, and that is, unfortunately, the long term, the ocean conditions which signal potential future winter precipitation cooled significantly over the past month, which is increasing the chances of La Nina type conditions, at least for the first half of the winter. We made some predictions last winter and they didn't manifest themselves, so hopefully they're wrong in the opposite direction this year, right? So we'll see what happens, but we try to use every piece of intel that we can. So next slide, please. And we'll spare the details in light of the lengthy discussion today, but as you can see, what the red line and the green line are statistical and dynamic averages of below normal ocean temperatures, which tend to signal lesser overall precipitation. Next slide, please. We were, I think everybody's well aware of the lake levels. I think we had a very smooth and transition to speed limit restrictions a little earlier than we typically do. We do still have about a dozen boats that obviously are out on the reservoir and are unable to be removed. They were scheduled to be removed by yesterday, but obviously we'll be extending that for those folks. But there's no damage to any district resource, as I said, or any private assets on the reservoir, fortunately, at this time. There'll be a little, probably need a wash on some of the ash on them, but other than that, everything's fine. There's a heavy law enforcement, very heavy law enforcement presence in the region, so we're not concerned about security of those facilities. Once that happens, we will, tow that. This usually happens every winter, but a lot of people aren't up there anywhere to see this. You will see the mooring facility pulled out in the middle of the lake, and that's because it can't sit on the lake bottom. It's a typical operation. It's just happening while people are still up there, at least before the fire. So they may ask, why is that thing in the middle of the lake? And that's just to protect it during low water conditions. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are a few statistics that Jesse and his staff have shared with us about our outreach efforts, which are, I'm not a social media guru myself, but it's pretty amazing. 13,000 people. We're getting a nice outreach to our customers, a lot of good feedback. I see reshares or reposts or whatever. I see a lot of information out there because of monitoring the fire and information that's shared. So despite the ongoing emergency situations, people are still aware of the need to conserve both for firefighting supplies as well as just in long term. We continue our community presentations. Obviously, they're temporarily halted until we can return to some sense of normal in our community, but we still have those on the calendar, and they will continue into the fall. And then we had a real nice feature in the waterfront on what it means. What does 15% mean when we say 15%? So I thought it came out really nice. Next slide, please. And now we're going to turn it over to General Counsel to finish up the presentation for us.
Good morning, board members. Brian Polson, General Counsel. Let me begin by saying that I was glad to hear that Dan also temporarily forgot that this was on the agenda today, given everything else that's been going on. But it is my pleasure to be here and to respond specifically to some of the questions that Director Day asked that I address at the last meeting concerning water use restrictions, restrictions on connections, and so forth. So I have just a couple of slides here. I'll go through them fairly quickly. And I begin with just a little bit of a screenshot here. All this is just to, is for folks, both the board and the public, to know that when the board adopted our drought action plan, which was just done in May at a public hearing, the board was adopting its water use restrictions that would become effective upon the implementation of certain stages of drought. These are the water use restrictions that the board has determined are necessary and appropriate to address the district's supply conditions. So if you'll go to the next slide, please, Jennifer. Here again, on the left-hand side of the screen is just a screenshot of page 5 of that document. And the reason that I put that in there is because the document itself includes the legal authorities upon which the district relies to impose water use restrictions. On the right side of the screen, I've highlighted just a couple of those sections and what they mean for the district. So for example, Water Code sections 353 through 356 provide that authority that when the district declares a water supply shortage emergency, it must adopt water use restrictions that will conserve the water supply that it has for the greatest public benefit. And that's what the district did. When we adopted our drought action plan, we effectively said, these are the water use restrictions that we, the board of directors, determine necessary to meet the supply conditions that exist for each of those stages. Okay. Those authorities go on to say that whatever water use restrictions are adopted by the board will last only as long as the water shortage condition exists, right? So we can't adopt water use restrictions that are in effect indefinitely because, of course, our water supply condition will change as time goes on, either for better or worse. And then finally, the point on this slide is that any restriction that the district adopts must be reasonably calculated to address the shortage that exists. And we determine what kind of shortage through the extensive analysis and planning documents that the district has, and this is included in our urban water management plan, which the board just adopted, that looks out 5 years, or rather that plans for 5 years and looks out on a farther horizon. It's also included in, we have periodic supply and demand reports that the district conducts and presents. I think the last one may have been in 2019. So these are the planning documents that calculate and analyze what the district's safe yield is, what our water supply is. And then the drought action plan says, okay, under those circumstances, these are the restrictions that we deem necessary in order to address that particular water supply shortage. Next slide, please, Jen. So I've just highlighted a couple of relevant provisions here, since Director Day asked specifically, do we have authority to impose a connection moratorium? In other words, can we restrict new customers from connecting to our system? And the answer to that is yes, the district does have that statutory authority under Section 356 of the Water Code. It specifically authorizes connection moratoria. But again, going back to the provision that I cited to on the previous slide, any water use restriction, including a connection moratoria, must be reasonably calculated to address the shortage that exists, okay? If, for example, we have abundant water supplies, then of course, the argument is, well, a moratorium on connections wouldn't be reasonably calculated to address the condition that you have, for example. And then finally, I just note here that the relevant standard of review under the Water Code is that any action that the district takes to restrict water use, it must not be fraudulent, arbitrary, or capricious. And that's a fairly deferential standard of review to the district, particularly the fraudulent part. But any restriction, if it's not reasonably calculated to address the shortage conditions that we have, could potentially be deemed arbitrary or capricious. So with that in mind, I just copied and pasted one of the tables from the recently adopted Urban Water Management Plan 2020 update, which shows in this particular table the district's current single dry year supply and demand. And this, according to that document, shows that the district has more supply than it does demand in a single dry year. And if you'll go to the next slide, please, Jen.
Brian, if I may. Yeah, the questions I've been getting and the questions then that I gave you guys, and by the way, thank you. I think I sent that list of questions, and then that very afternoon, I think Caldor Fire decided to head straight for Jenkinson Lake. So I was actually impressed that I even got any answer. I wasn't expecting it, but thank you. I think we may want to consider something for the newsletter or this targeted outreach communication for El Dorado Hills. Some of the information that we got about, if we're in El Dorado Hills, we're averaging 300 or 400 new home connections a year. And if they use, 4/10 of an acre, even round it up and call it half an acre foot. So maybe shutting off that completely would save maybe 200 acre feet the next year. And then if we're looking at, our supply, our demand, that 200 acre feet is not going to make a huge difference, but could impact a lot of businesses and obviously our short housing supply in the area. My other questions, which were questions I was getting from constituents, was what about Folsom Lake though? Isn't that the bottleneck? And I think some of the answers that Dan, that we got today, talking about how low can we go, and we can go pretty low. It sounds like certainly lower than anybody else. They would be in a much bigger world of hurt before we would. But that was of concern to folks, and it really got me started thinking about it. What if next year's worse, and then the next year after that's worse, what would we do? And then I thought, could we even do a moratorium? I guess we can. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that we do. But anyhow, I think we might want to communicate with folks down there that not that many homes are being built in El Dorado Hills, certainly not compared to Folsom. That the water usage per residence is going down on average. It wouldn't save potentially that much. It would be a last resort sort of thing, literally if we couldn't get anything out of Folsom. But anyhow, I would just suggest that we might want to think about doing that to try to reduce anxiety, because there's a lot of anxiety out there.
Great suggestion. Thank you. And I think I might just have one more slide.
Just wanted to add one other thing to tail on to Director Day's comment. I mean, our constituencies basically cross over each other, and I have been getting those questions. That memo that you sent us was perfect. And it did, the fire did start Saturday, but I mailed it to them on after you had sent it to us. And they all complimented, and they said, this is very thorough. I'm glad, that informs us. And it is anxiety based on political rhetoric about mandatory 55 gallons. This is where it all started from. But when people do understand where their water source is coming from in an educational area, they understand it better. And that gave us the tools to be able to kind of explain to them, because, the water delivery system here in EID is very complex. And people don't realize how complex, especially new residents. So it's always beneficial, and I really appreciate the more information you give us, the better it is for us. Thank you.
And just to acknowledge it, Brian Mueller and one member of his staff, I think Mike Brink, put that memo together, and they did an outstanding job.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Jim. Thank you. And I will just say that, the work and the effort that our engineering department in particular goes into in planning our water supply and planning for future conditions is just outstanding, and it certainly makes my job a heck of a lot easier, when contemplating things like, well, gee, are the district's decisions that it's making in terms of water use restrictions defensible? And I think without a doubt they are.
And I don't think people realize how conservative we have been, how very conservative on the reporting and the very conservative input that has to do on how we manage our water, because we really are quite conservative.
I do have a question. Alan, you indicated that Folsom, and this kind of goes into this, is going to implement some restrictions, and what are those? I'm not privy to them.
Yeah, they want 20% conservation, and they're, at the end of the month, they're mandating that only 2 days a week outdoor irrigation. And as we all know, September can be quite a hot month, and 2 days is a pretty tight restriction. And then you have folks there that go, well, but why are they still doing the work south of 50 when I have to let my lawn die? Yeah. Everybody wants to help, but they want it to be equitable, I think.
So our 15% voluntary still fits in close enough to that at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think where we're at, I think we're being fair and reasonable. And I'm not going to second guess their decisions. I don't know their water supply as well as I know ours, but I think we're fine. And it's just mainly was the concerns about the bottleneck of Folsom Lake, because it's such a visual, stark reminder of the drought.
They're limited in their water portfolio, receiving it from Folsom Lake. We're blessed and cursed, I guess, in a way, having all the reservoirs and transmission systems upcountry with multiple reservoirs and multiple water portfolios. We have a much complicated but much more diverse portfolio. And then when we move that water right, the permit 2112 upstream, that even gives us greater flexibility.
Well, going back to the complexity of it, it's like we can turn a valve in one place and have water going to another. It's not that easy at Folsom, and it's just basically like we have a lot of bypasses, and we just need to make sure that the bypasses are clear, and we continue to provide that, so.
like EID, Folsom and many of our neighboring water agency counterparts have recently adopted their urban water management plans with updated water supply contingency plans. And so, like us, they're, taking actions, and I suspect those actions will change. And it's very dynamic right now over the course of at least the next month or several months, where, they start to implement more and more restrictions depending on what their water supply conditions are. So this may actually be my last slide. I thought I had one more chart here on the next one that just showed that, yeah, here we go. So this is just building upon the last slide that showed our current water supply versus demand for a single dry year. This chart, again, taken from the recently adopted urban water management plan, it just shows the 5-year outlook. So multiple dry years looking into the future. What are the district supply and demand? And bottom line is, if you look at the furthest, if you go to the right column at the bottom, in the 5th consecutive dry year, as far out as 2045 into our planning future, we still maintain more supply than we will have demand at that point in time. So.
And one of the other, it's more of a long-term question. The question I'd ask was, what are we doing to strategically plan for climate change? I had included a link, because whatever your opinion on climate change is, the U.S. Marine Corps and the U.S. military are planning strategically to cope with it. And so I think if they are, I think we need to as well. And then, Jim, if you want to touch on what the region is doing.
The region, including the water agency, has been preparing the American River. Oh, I'm sorry, Brian, why don't you do that?
Yeah, we've been somewhat involved with, but it's mainly been the reclamation, has a study going with PCWA and El Dorado Water Agency on potential climate change impacts and mitigation actions as they, as looking out, 100 years or so. So that we've been part of that, feeding them information about our system and potential impacts. That report's not yet available. It was supposed to be complete sometime this year, so we'll definitely take a look at that and implement some of those recommendations. I think probably the recommendations are going to be more storage, and again, whatever climate change is, the impacts are thought to be, more rainfall than snow earlier in the season than late, and so that's where that storage would be really beneficial down the road. But again, I think the consensus is most of those impacts are going to be way down towards the end of the century, and not immediate. Whether this is climate change that we're seeing now, who knows? But bottom line, we're taking a look at it, and we're part of the planning process.
All right, just on our topic of ensuring complete and accurate information, I want to make sure, as we discussed related to our partners down the hill, they too have contingency measures, as Brian described, in demand, also in their ability to access water. So they, likewise, actually the Bureau of Reclamation, because their responsibility to get water to a different point of delivery, does have emergency barrage measures in place. I don't want to leave you with the mind that they will run out of water before we do. They are implementing similar measures. It just, we're aware of it from a broad level, but we only talk to the level of detail about what our specific agency is doing. So, and that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you very much. It was quite a bit of detail, and posting it up in social media continues to keep our people informed. So we're going to move on to the action items. Item number 10.
Director Anzini, you might want to ask for public comment
Oh,
on that information item.
Okay. Thank you for the reminder. Is there anyone from the public who wants to make a comment on that presentation?
Director Anzini, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 9.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to action item number 10.
Move one.
Second.
All right.
Director Veerkamp would like to make a statement for action item number 10.
Yes, I'd like to recuse myself due to our brother's company being involved in the financial payment.
Public comment?
Public comment?
Director Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 10. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote Division 1,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 5,
Aye.
Division 1, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 11, engineering.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Doug Venable. I'm an environmental review analyst with the district. And I'm here this morning to request the board consider awarding a contract for hazardous fuels treatments at the El Dorado Canal Diversion and Reservoir A water treatment facilities. Just for your information, we have changed option 2 since the agenda was published for the potential impacts for the Caldor fire, and we'll review those once we get there. Next slide, please. Previous board actions include, in October 2018, the board adopted the resolutions approving 3 CAL FIRE grants authorizing hazardous fuels treatments at 4 district facilities. In September of 2019, the board awarded Market Forestry Management to implement the hazardous fuels treatments. And in June of this year, the board adopted the M&D for the El Dorado Canal Diversion Vegetation Management Project. Next slide, please. In September of 2018, CAL FIRE awarded 3 grants to the district totaling $1,963,005 to conduct hazardous fuels treatments at Sly Park, Camp 5, Flume 46, and Weber Reservoir. All projects have been completed and approved by CAL FIRE. Next slide, please. The district received authorization to use remaining Weber Reservoir grant funds for 250 acres of herbicide treatments at the Weber Reservoir property. And the award was at the August 9th meeting. That was awarded. And also 35 acres of mastication hand treatments around the diversion dam and the upper canal. And again, in light of current conditions, we'll address that in just a minute later, but later in the slides. The district was also awarded authorization to use Camp 5 and Flume 46 funds to tarp and burn the remaining piled vegetation at Sly Park, purchase and apply herbicides to areas previously treated for hazardous fuels, and remove bark and beetle infested trees. Next slide, please. Project objectives for the El Dorado Canal diversion facilities are to produce hazardous fuels and protect district infrastructure and nearby communities, increase the forest and landscape resiliency, and reduce the rate of spread, duration and intensity, and ignition of the crowns into nearby forests. Next slide, please. This is a project map, and the district properties are marked here in red, and the treatment areas are shaded green here. We like to do 10 acres of mastication and approximately 25 acres of hand treatments. Some of the district facilities that we would be protecting here would be the operator's residence, the SCADA and equipment building, and flumes 1 and 2. Next slide, please. The treatment areas include the north and south side of Highway 50 adjacent to the operator's residence. In the upper portion of this image above Highway 50 there is Weber Mill Road, and the district's property runs on either side of that, and that's an area that would be masticated on each side, as well as treated on the both sides of Highway 50 there to reduce the potential for starts on the Highway 50. Next slide, please. Here's a bit of, closer of the, Jen, can I get the pointer, please? I will. So the pointer here is on the operator's residence, and thank you. And this is one of the facilities that we'd be protecting, as well as the footbridge across the South Fork American River and another storage shed down to the bottom left there. Thank you. Next slide, please. Here's a photo of the treatment area looking up and south of the canal. This is just a typical area that's throughout, that shows the dense fuels that's on both sides of of our facilities. Next slide, please. Moving on to the Reservoir A water treatment plant. The project objectives are the same as for the diversion facility, and that would be to protect district infrastructure and nearby communities, increase the forest and landscape resiliency, reduce the rate of spread, duration, and intensity, and fuel ignition to the crowns of nearby forests. Next slide, please. Treatments at Reservoir A would include 15 acres of mastication and 2 acres of hand treatments along the fence line on the east side there. Next slide, please. The treatment area here is marked in orange and will be focused on removing the heavy fuel loads on the eastern side of the parcel. Next slide, please. As Director Corcoran mentioned earlier, Reservoir A does not go offline and continuously supplies potable water to the district's customers, as well as supplies the majority of the district when the El Dorado Hills drinking water treatment is down. It is a critical facility that has a high priority of protection. Next slide, please. Turning to the California Environmental Quality Act, the board adopted the MND for the diversion facility in June of this year, and staff will file a fuels management exemption for the Reservoir A facility upon the board's award of this contract. Next slide, please. The scope of work for the contract includes 10 acres of mastication and 25 acres of hand treatments at the diversion facility, and 15 acres of mastication and 2 acres of treatments at the Reservoir A facility. In addition to the mastication at Reservoir A, that removes all vegetation 10 inches in diameter and below, the Reservoir A scope of work includes removing 45 standing dead or dying trees, as well as removing a large amount of downed trees that have been accumulating over the years. Next slide, please. Moving on to the received proposals. Staff received 4 proposals, and Julian Tree Care was the responsible low bidder at $182,500. Staff believes that the very large discrepancy between these received proposals was due to the high demand of forestry contractors as well as the relatively small project size. Just to let the board know, in addition to the job walk, staff and our contracted forester met with Julian Tree Care. We conduct a follow-up site visit as well as review the scope of work and the equipment they're going to be using. Also, Julian Tree Care provided references as well as successful past projects with East Bay Mud as well as the El Cerrito Fire Department. And we believe that, our staff believes that the Julian Tree Care is qualified and equipped to complete all the project requirements as well as meet the objectives. Next slide, please. So funding for the El Dorado Diversion Canal treatments will be funded fully reimbursable through the remaining CAL FIRE Weber Reservoir grant funds. The Reservoir A treatments will be funded either by a pending CAL FIRE grant that we submitted in May of this year. We expected those results to come out at the end of July. I think they're a bit busy, so they have delayed that. A sister grant for forest health, those results have come out, and it looks like they're pending approval here. So, however, if that grant is not awarded, staff will request to utilize the remaining funds from the Weber Reservoir grant just as we did for the diversion. Staff time for administration and project management for the grant are reported to CAL FIRE as in-kind matching funds. Next slide, please. Board option 1 would be to award a contract to Julian Tree Care Incorporated in the not-to-exceed amount of $182,500 for hazardous fuel treatments at the El Dorado Canal Diversion and Reservoir A treatment plant facilities for the El Dorado Canal Vegetation Management Project. Next slide. And option 2, the one that's been changed, to award a contract to Julian Tree Care Incorporated in a not-to-exceed amount of $182,500 for hazardous fuel treatments at the El Dorado Canal Diversion and Reservoir A water treatment plant facilities, and authorize the general manager to renegotiate the scope of services if necessary due to the impacts of the Caldor fire. Option 3 would be to take no action, and staff recommends option 2.
Move to.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's been a motion, a second. Questions, comments?
The only comment I have is it's substantially cheaper for this organization than the other bidders. I mean, it's significantly different.
Significant, and which is
And
why.
so your staff has analyzed the capability of this company to perform, and you're happy with it, huh?
We are, as well as our forester, our contracted forester. We brought them out there, we reviewed their equipment and their personnel. I just believe that the prices were inflated due to the other contractors, due to
Right.
demand and the relative small size.
Okay.
I think Julian's quote is probably a realistic, normal times kind of quote. Unfortunately, a lot of contractors have been like, I'm gonna throw a big bid in there, maybe something will stick, and then we got lots of gravy.
Yeah, we were actually a little surprised to see some of the larger market forestry and others, local outfits that came and did not throw a bid in. So it looks like they're in high demand.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, does Director Veerkamp have anything to say? No? Okay, all right. This is when the public has an opportunity.
It does not appear that there are any members of the public wishing to comment on action item number 11. Would you like for me to call for the vote?
Yes, please.
How do you vote? Division 1,
Aye.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 5,
Aye.
Division 1, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 12, regarding the Simeon Reed construction.
All right. Good morning, members of the board. Hope everybody's having a good day. I'm Kerry Muchler. I'm the senior civil engineer coming before you to discuss the construction of the Flume 30 replacement project. Next slide, please. So previous board actions was the awarding of the design back in 2018. So design has progressed until this year, and then the adoption of the CIP last year, depending on funding. Next slide. The problems with the issues, or I guess with Flume 30. This was last constructed in 1981. It has gone several repairs over the years and relinings. And as we'll see further on in the presentation, it's in need of replacement. The age and condition right now are at that time. So next slide. Scope of work. We have 3 different scopes of work for this project. The first scope is going to be getting the roads in to access the flume. I'll discuss more of these as I go along through the presentation. The second is to improve the Narrows bypass road. The board will remember some of that, the issues that we've had with that little stretch of roadway. And then next year will be the actual construction of the Flume 30 replacement. So the road work, the original road work is a 3-mile service road that is currently in existence. We will be doing a 2,200-foot-long road from the end of that road down to the downstream portal or to Flume 30. And then the actual construction is going to be, for the flume, will be the new mechanically stabilized earth walls and flume sections that will be back in concrete. We'll also be doing a little bit of stabilization on the downstream side of some of the hillside down there. Next slide. So here's the access road. So the portion in black is the 3-mile section. The portion in red, this is roughly drawn in by me, not to any scale or artistic ability, but that is our new access road that will come down onto the old bench and tie in. And can I go to the next slide? We have some pictures we'll get to. So once again, reiterating, this is a 3-mile long access road, 2,200-foot long connecting road down to the flume. This did eliminate the use of helicopter. We had an estimate of around $4 million for the use of a helicopter. The roads are going to cost about $2 million to get in, so a net savings to the district of $2 million to get this, plus the ongoing ability to reach the Mill to Bowl and Flume 30 connection. So those are pretty substantial benefits with just those right there. Next slide. So this is the Mill to Bowl portal right here, and Flume 30 coming out. This road will come onto the right side of that building and connect down into Flume 30, and we'll be using this for construction. We'll be spanning Bull Creek. I'll show you some slides to that a little later on. Next slide. This is the back side of that same building. Those rocks on the left will be removed, and a roadway a little further closer to us will start and go up and over that building. Next slide. This is the hill that will be coming down. As you can see, it's pretty steep terrain. It's going to curve around and wind around. But this is what we're getting. The grades will be pretty tricky coming down, but it's all doable and stuff that we've done in the past. The Narrows bypass. So for this one, the blue is the bypass road, and then the Narrows is this little red, this darkened red stretch right here that is getting circled with the mouse right now. This has been our bottleneck, a little bit of a bottleneck with our construction in the past. Next slide. So what we've done in the past, since the construction of Flume 44 back in 2018, we've negotiated with the Forest Service to continue to use this road. We've got a 75% reduction in load carrying, which means concrete trucks aren't coming up full. They're coming up, instead of 10 yards, they're delivering 7 to 7.5 yards. The amount of concrete we put into these projects, that becomes pretty significant in how many additional trucks that we have to get in there. Same goes for moving soil and rebar and all the other materials that we've got to move into the site. So we've also had lower speeds to get through this site, and we have, as of our Flume 3840 job, we have a weekly monitoring of the road, meaning that we have a survey crew go out every week, and we have, I believe it's 20 survey pins in the road to detect any movement in the road. So it's quite a bit to just be able to keep using this road. This road, when we are done with it, will only be accessed by SPI and EID. It'll be behind locked gates and only for our use. And will be all weather. Next slide. So this is the Narrows. As you can see, single lane road. It's about a half-mile long. Gets a little precarious. It really helps to have radios and CBs when we work in this area to make sure that nobody's having to back up on with trucks and stuff to get through here. Next slide. So this is the existing logging road that we'll be improving. This is kind of just a representative sample. It's dirt. We will be putting rock and down to make this all weather. It will be able to be plowed so that we can continue to use to get to our sites on this, what we call the Beat 3. And this becomes really beneficial because right now on the narrows, we aren't able to really plow the road. We have to scoop the snow all out because right below the narrows is Flume 46. So we can't let the snow go over the edge. Next slide. Now then, Project 30, or Flume 30. You can see its proximity to Flume 44. I didn't, just for convenience sake, Flume 3840, which we're just finishing up right now, is right there. This is located about 6 miles in on Plum Creek Road, and then we come in off of Camp 2 Road. Next slide. This picture was taken back in 2011. I'm glad to say that the water conditions have improved somewhat. This is a full canal right now. And as you can see, at this point, we're at the edge of the thing. It laps over. When we did our siphon assessment and cleaned out the siphon, we did actually get about 2 inches more capacity in here. So we're not as skirting the edge with this, but as you can see, this is an older flume section. It's got some problems. Next slide. This is a picture of one of the underneath the flume. You can see right over here we've put some new timbers in. We've got some metal straps in to help keep everything going. But we're seeing some deterioration in the wood. We've got gaps going right here. That's the eroding of the wood from the moisture. Next slide. This is one of the holes that was fixed. Again, deteriorated wood. Cut it out. A little section in here. We put metal plate over it and epoxy that in. Again, just to keep the leaks under control. Next slide.
Oh, thanks, because it looks like one of my home repairs.
Well, it's also like one of my home repairs too. I try to bury those behind walls. This is Bull Creek right here. We have previously come in and fortified this abutment. This project will do the same thing over on this abutment right here. Point out that, notice that we've put additional wood in to add support to the flume section. Let's see, and the Bull Creek area will stay intact. We'll be bypassing that and keeping the flow regulated through there. Next slide. Again, what we just discussed with what's going to happen with our Flume 30 work. This is an example of what it'll look like when it's done. This is, I believe this is Flume 31, which is just downstream. But we'll have a concrete trapezoidal section and freeboard again into this section of our canal. Next slide. So for the environmental portion of our thing, we have gone through a mitigated negative declaration that was approved in August of last year. We have received our permits from the Corps and Regional Water Control Board and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. We've also gotten our approval from the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So we're ready to go with this project. So with this project, we're also asking 3 contracts to be awarded. And I'm going to go over each one of those right now. The first one is our construction contract. We received 2 bids for this. KW Emerson, if you recall, they were the ones who've done Flume 44 and 3848 for us at 9.9, and Siblin Reed, whose bid was 8.8. And Siblin's done Flume 10. Remember our 2017 storms? They did a number of work in Flumes 10, 5, and all through that area. And then also recently the Pacific Tunnel last year. They were the contractor for that work. Engineer's estimate for the project was $8.1 million. Many of the board members are aware that the commodities have gone up in several of our, in construction. Wood has especially gone up, steel, concrete, And so I'm pretty sure those are why we're seeing a little difference on our engineer's estimate. The engineer's estimate was done at the beginning of the year when we were wrapping up design. So during that time, we've had those increases in cost. The next contract that we have is the Construction Engineering Services Contract, the CES. The biggest part of this is our Quality Control Inspection Program. This is a part that is required by FERC. In order to get approval by FERC, this plan has to be in place. And that includes all of our, the CES portion will be responding to all our RFIs, our submittals. They go out to the field if there's any field clarifications or helping us with our change orders. The QSIP portion is all our specialty inspection. That's making sure that our concrete is done right, the rebar is placed right, the MSE wall and the compaction testing for the dirt on the roads and the walls are all up to specification. So all that is part of this QSIP. And again, this is all needing to be done before we bid the project. We get this approval from FERC. So that's why this is a single source contract, is we had to go get this stuff in and approved. And GHD is our engineer of record for this project. And they have done numerous projects for us. And that the contract, again, single source for $697,450 is for this portion of inspection. Next slide. In addition to that, we have our general inspection. These jobs go 24/7. We don't have the staff to fully implement a 24/7 in-house inspection. So we go out to bid for these services. We received 3 bids from GHD, MGE, and Gannett Fleming. All these firms have done work again and are doing work on several of our flume projects right now. All these contracts were done at 2,500 hours. So the discrepancy that we see here is the amount that they put towards their staff to do the inspection. And GHD had a lower per person bill rate, hence the lower rate. They also, since they are up there for our QSIP, they gave us a discount on, because they have the same staff will kind of be up there doing that type of work, they were able to have some efficiencies in their cost. MGE and Gannett Fleming also had external staff in addition to their own staff, which also account for some of the increased costs. Next slide. So cost breakdown that we have for the project is listed here in this table. We've went over numerous, all the other portions of this. The one part that we do have that I need to mention is our environmental monitoring. We have a creek that we will, while we're in construction, we need to do monitoring. Plus we have some, by our permit with Fish and Wildlife, some post-monitoring after construction that we will do, and that's what those costs are for. So the CIP, we had $10.3 million for the CIP. Total cost for this project right now is at 11.1. That includes our contingency. Again, this will be done by the 2020 bond issuance, and this is a 2-phase project for 2021 and 2022. Next slide, please. So option 1, to award contracts to Sibley and Reed in the not-to-exceed amount of $8,782,400 for construction of the Flume 30 replacement project, to GHD in the not-to-exceed amount of $697,450 for construction of construction engineering services, and GHD in the not-to-exceed amount of $290,000 for general inspection, and authorize additional funding of $375,000 for capitalized labor, $30,000 for environmental support, and $1,017,485 in contingency, for a total funding request of $11,192,335 for the Flume 30 replacement project. Staff recommends option 1.
Camp will move option 1.
Second.
Okay. Any questions from the board now? No? Questions from the public?
The only thing I'd add is Jennifer's looking for the public comment. This was actually in the path of the fire.
Yeah.
And we were going to negotiate with Siblin Reed to reduce their bid because it was burnt up and they didn't have to remove it. But the good news is it's still standing and operating just fine.
It's good to get it made into concrete.
Yes.
Okay, anybody from the public?
Director Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 12. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes, you would.
How do you vote Division 1,
Aye.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 5,
Aye.
Division 1, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right. This concludes the action items on our agenda. Want any review of assignments?
None today.
All right.
Would like to just point out, I know Director Day has requested this. At the next meeting, September 13th, we'll be reviewing the district water master plan as part of the tentative items coming up. So that will be there along with all the other items listed in the tentative items.
I appreciate that. Is there, given the Caldor fire and all that, will there be adequate time or, I mean, it's,
Yeah, I still plan to do it on the 13th.
Okay.
That's fine. Thank you, though.
thank you.
All right.
And as always, there are quite a few other items on tentatively scheduled items. So if there's any members of the board that have questions, please reach out to Jim or I, and we can help you with that.
All right. Move for adjournment? Okay. Meeting is adjourned.
At 10:41 a.m.
Thank you.